Ladies and gentlemen, it is, as always, 2 times a year, the Falcons. And everybody say it in chat as everybody else in the chat here with us. Even if you're in your car, at your home, in the office, no matter where you are, say it with me, the Falcons. Absolutely. Doesn't matter what's happening. Doesn't matter the situation. If the Falcons winning means the world ends, it is still the Falcons. Always and forever. There are 2 things that you should be loyal to in life, God and the Falcons. Literally, you are allowed to abstain and divorce your wife before you are allowed to ever say something nice about the Atlanta Falcons. It is the Falcons edition of the Who Dat Confessional podcast to wrap up 2023. Welcome in, everybody. It's amazing to see you, as always, coming in with the big energy and the very vocal opinion that no matter what, I don't care how much you hate DA, I don't care how much you hate Mickey Loomis, I don't give a damn if your car broke down, your cat died, and your mama's calling you right now asking for $3,000 to buy groceries, and you know damn well she ain't spending it on groceries. No matter what's going on in your life, today we're going to talk about the greatness that is the New Orleans Saints beating the Atlanta Falcons, because that's all that we need. Who dat? Welcome in, TJ. Big Head Slim, Eric Howard, Lester Shipman, Randall, good to see you, Mr. Gerald, Jesse Onashia, Solar Flares, Taylor Babineau, James Griffon, Mark from the 504, Ato 1220, and everybody else. We coming in with the energy. We coming in like Cat Williams on Club Shay Shay. We about to expose all the secrets, but the secrets just happen to be residing in the A, T, and the L. 3 letters that I hate more than anything. They got the worst airport in the world. They got the worst football team in the world. They got the worst everything in the world. It's the Atlanta Falcons. And it doesn't matter who you love, hate, or dismiss. We're going to beat them this week in New Orleans, in the Dome. Sacred place, sacred ground. All that analytics that we do and all that film study, put that bull aside. Don't care. Beat the Falcons. All I'm worried about. Beat the Falcons. Who, by the way, defensively gave up 432 yards against the Chicago Bears. Whew. Good golly, Miss Molly. Got to beat them. Got to take them down. Raheem says, even if you have to eat tuna and mac and cheese, doesn't matter. Saints going to beat the Falcons. That's how you know Raheem Gillion been around this podcast a long time. Raheem Gillion is citing, for those who are unfamiliar, the common food and delicacy of the Elias J. Williams household. So more power to him, because I tried it and nope, didn't put hair on my chest or nothing. Just put depression in my mind. But other than that, I'm happy for him that he enjoys it. I enjoy roasted falcon on a crisp Sunday morning. And the New Orleans Saints will be playing at 12 o'clock, January 7th. So your time of having late night games is basically over. I really, like next year when they come out with the schedule, be very shocked to see the Saints have like 5 primetime games. Because this year, they've had multiple like big games. And I was like, don't see that happening again unless New Orleans just like shocks somebody. But if you remember, we had early this year's second game of the season, we had a Monday nighter, and then we had a Thursday nighter, so that's 2, and then we had recently another Thursday nighter, so that's 3. So we had 3 primetime games. I'm pretty sure we had planned or had planned one later one. They got like written down to a noon game because New Orleans has been New Orleans this year. So, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Now, I will go ahead and acknowledge the one truth that is present in the room. The Atlanta Falcons did beat the New Orleans Saints back in November. This was a big one coming out of the bye week. The Saints really needed to handle their business and take down Atlanta in Atlanta. They could not do that. They lost 24-15, even though their offense had 444 yards of offense. And I say that number specifically because this is when Mickey Loomis was talking about how well they were doing moving the ball offensively. Well, they did move the ball offensively and had right around 300 yards passing. You know, sure, I guess that's technically true, but they also had 2 turnovers. That wasn't great. Now, the defense forced 2 turnovers. And in the last game, they forced 4 turnovers. And if the Saints are going to win, they're going to need to do that. If you actually look, for the first 9 weeks of the season, the Saints had forced a turnover in every game until the Minnesota game. But since the Minnesota game, including the Minnesota game, they've actually only done it in 3 of the 4 opportunities. Or I'm sorry, 3 in the 7 opportunities. So defense, gotta get that ball. Gotta get that ball, fam. Like, bring it back to that offense. You don't know how often the offense is going to score, so you got to give them every opportunity possible to score. Are we getting rid of Lattimore? We'll see. You know, it is a possibility. I wouldn't say it's like high on the radar, but I mean, I know that's gotten a lot of chatter lately. We will focus on how we can beat Atlanta, but I will say this, like, there's definitely some truth to the fact that, one, you have a huge contract on Lattimore. He is getting older. He is not a healthy 17-game-a-year guy. And none of that, by the way, is to say that he is not an elite player, because he absolutely is. He won a billion% is one of those, like, he's one of them dudes. But as we talked about in the Discord yesterday, remember, Paul Adebo is 24. He'll be 25 heading into his 4th NFL season. Lante Taylor will be 25 heading into his 3rd NFL season. Saints have got a couple of young guys outside. So if you could get something super valuable for Lattimore, maybe. But I don't think the Saints are just trying to shop him at this very moment. Now, I understand the thoughts, and I know that yesterday, if I remember right, there was a good piece that Underhill and Triplett were talking about on NOLA.football. And I think that if they were going to make a move, one of the few things that they do have is Marshawn Lattimore. One of the only things of value that's still young enough to justify the cost. Because people have talked about, well, trade Michael Thomas. Michael Thomas ain't getting traded for a variety of reasons. Alvin Kamara is not getting traded for a variety of reasons, including contract. But guys who have a contract and it is tradable, Lattimore, the way they did the restructure here, is a possibility, but I would still say that they're not actively shopping. More of, if the offer is really good, they would give it a shot. So we'll just have to wait and see. But again, we're going to focus on this season. We're going to focus on wrapping it up. I do not believe that your New Orleans Saints are going to make it to the playoffs. I'm just going to keep it real. I don't think so. And I hope that I am wrong. I really do. Some of y'all don't hope I'm wrong. Some of y'all actually hope I'm right. I don't think the Saints are going to make it to the playoffs. However, real quick before we get into it, here are the playoff scenarios. Here's like what has to happen to make it happen. So to clinch the NFC South, the New Orleans Saints have to beat the Atlanta Falcons, which hopefully happens no matter what. Tampa Bay loses. Carolina. Technically, they could also tie. But tying the Panthers actually sounds worse than losing to the Panthers somehow. So you got to make that happen no matter what. Or beat the Falcons, which you should do anyway. Beat the Falcons, and then Seattle loses, and Green Bay loses. So the division's the easier of the two. Neither are easy, which is why I don't think it happens. Because how often can you think, as somebody who has followed the New Orleans Saints a long time, I know many of you have, how often can you think of everything falling into place for the New Orleans Saints? How many times can y'all think of that actually happening? And I don't think many of you can bring up everything just falls into place for the New Orleans Saints to be ready to go. It just doesn't really happen, right? It just doesn't really happen. And I know that when you look at the injury report, we'll talk about the injury report for the Saints here in a second. When you talk about the injury report for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, you know, people talk about Baker Mayfield. Well, he was at practice today. He was only throwing lightly, but I would be personally kind of shocked if he doesn't play. I'm just being honest. Even with that rib injury, I'll be shocked if he doesn't play against Carolina. I think he's going to go out there and play. And they've got a lot of their big names back, like Carlton Davis will be back, their corner. They've got Shaq Barrett. is going to be playing, and basically their entire roster is going to be coming back to play the Panthers. You got to hope that, maybe Brian Burns playing for the Panthers can get enough sacks on. I mean, anyway, we're not here to preview that game. I'm just saying that I'd be surprised if he doesn't play. And we'll have to wait and see. But you got to handle your business first. New Orleans has to handle their business. I think that before any of this, and I'll be honest, the playoffs part doesn't even bother me I don't think about the playoff part as much because I'm not really worried about the playoffs. I'm worried about this rivalry. And the last thing I want in this rivalry is for the New Orleans Saints to be losing to the Atlanta Falcons. So let's go over the New Orleans Saints injury report over the past couple of days. How about we do that together, right? New Orleans Saints, Juwan Johnson did not practice Wednesday, but is limited on Thursday, so he did improve. Lonnie Johnson, Alvin Kamara, Nefi Sewell. Nefi Sewell is completely out because he is going to have surgery on his ACL. Landon Young, those are your 4 DNPs, and then A.T. Perry was missing, but A.T. Perry is listed as missing because of an illness. So we'll wait and see tomorrow if he ends up being ready to play, but he's missed 2 practices due to illness. So it was the second time we've kind of had a bug run through. Kendre Miller limited with his ankle. Eric McCoy limited. Chris Olave limited. And Peyton Turner is, of course, practicing again. This is obviously the last time he can practice. And then they can elevate him for him to play. We'll see if he actually ends up playing in the game this upcoming Sunday. Now, as far as the Atlanta Falcons go, Calais Campbell is on rest, but do expect to see him play. Drew Dowman, their center, is a DNP. DeMarco Helmas, as well as Mike Hughes, corner and safety, both DNP. Now, Mike Hughes, it was Drew Dowman and DeMarco Helmas that are DNP, but Mike Hughes, with his concussion, this is week 2, he was moved to limited, so probably going to see him there. Cordarrelle Patterson was DNP, but that's just because of rest, so don't look too deep into that one. Troy Anderson, Zach Harrison, and then finally, Taylor Heineke, all limited. So that is your injury report for the Atlanta Falcons. So TJ says, hard to imagine DA with a winning record. Well, it'll happen if they can beat Atlanta. And look, in spite of DA, I want to beat Atlanta. There is no hatred for DA strong enough that could ever make me want to lose to Atlanta. I'm just going to go ahead and disappoint y'all now. My loyalty is to the New Orleans Saints, and part of the loyalty that is the New Orleans Saints is hating the Atlanta Falcons. And I'm sorry, I'll say it boldly and loudly to your face. You are not a real Saints fan if you want to lose so that DA doesn't have a winning record because we're playing the Atlanta Falcons. Now, if you said it and we were playing, I don't know, fudge, the freaking Raiders, sure. You know what? Cool. I understand it. I don't give a damn. The Saints season's kind of lost to me anyway. I don't feel like no matter what, they did well enough this year. But against the Falcons, the answer is unequivocally, can't debate it, got to win. And I don't care if that does give DA a winning record. And I don't care if that does secure DA's job for another year. DA is secondary to beating Atlanta. And let's talk about how they can actually do that, because yes, the New Orleans Saints can actually do that. So starts off with quarterback play. And obviously you've seen them use 2 different quarterbacks so far this season. Most of the year it's been Desmond Ridder, but you've also seen Taylor Heineke. Both of these guys can move, and both of these guys can make it painful if you're the New Orleans Saints. Now, recently, you've seen Desmond Ridder playing again, right? Desmond Ridder played a little bit against Carolina. He played against Tampa. You've also seen Taylor Heineke playing. Remember still the NFL tiebreaker, best win percentage in common games? What does that mean? Games that y'all play the same opponent. Those are common games. But we've seen Taylor Heineke, which is basically just Desmond Ridder, but a little bit older. For those that remember, the New Orleans Saints played and lost against Desmond Ridder while he was leading the charge. And then he played multiple games and then actually had Heineke starting this most recent game. But he obviously had that injury. And neither of them have just looked good. Just to be clear, we trash talk, and I think that we appropriately trash talk some of the problems that the New Orleans Saints have at the quarterback position. But Here's the combined numbers, by the way, for Atlanta. Their combined quarterback play, 60.9% passing, 15 touchdowns, 15 interceptions, 39 sacks, and a quarterback rating of 79.3. That's combined. So, like, as much as I do believe Derek Carr has not played at a high level, I would say he's played at a mid level. And some of those games were good mid, and some of those games were very, very bad mid. He's still at 67.9, 21 TDs to 8 interceptions and 29 sacks, as well as a quarterback rating of 94.7. So, yeah, I mean, it's not a good quarterback situation. Now, here's the thing with Atlanta. Same thing we talked about last time. Atlanta can move the ball with their quarterback getting out of the pocket and scrambling. And this is something that New Orleans has just consistently struggled with. Desmond Ridder has 200 yards rushing this year, as well as 5 rushing TDs. And Taylor Heineke also has 125 rushing yards this year and a TD from rushing. So it's not like this is a guaranteed here, because there's been a problem. And by the way, because I saw TJ mention it, Heineke did start, but he did not finish the game, and you had Desmond Ridder playing here on the 31st, 5 days ago. So Ridder threw, I think, only like 5 passes. In terms of snap count, it wasn't very high, but he did play in that game, and then he played 2 weeks prior to that against Carolina. So, we talk about New Orleans, and see, this is also like, people got kind of frustrated with Rev, because I was like, this is a good roster. And they're like, this isn't a good roster. I'm like, you ought to realize that, like, even as bad as Derek Carr may be, especially combined with his OC, it gets worse out there. And not only does it get worse, it gets ugly out there. You look at that stat line that I just rattled off for quarterback, and you would swear that I'm talking about, a quarterback from 1974. Nope, that's today. That's how it is today. Like, wild, crazy. There are quarterbacks who have started, 15 games who have got 11 touchdowns thrown. That's Bryce Young, by the way. You know why the NFC South is the worst division in the NFL? Because they got the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. By the way, Derrick Henry has 2 thrown touchdowns. I just want to give that a shout out. That's just really cool. That dude has thrown 2 touchdowns. That's wild. Shout out to him. He's thrown 2 touchdowns. That's kind of dope. It's kind of dope. But when we talk about quarterbacks as a whole, Derek Carr currently ranks 14th overall in touchdowns thrown, mid AF, but he is what he is. If you're curious where he lands amongst starters that have thrown interceptions, just because why not? 22nd, that's a good 22nd. So if we were to reverse that, y'all can run that reverse number in your head real quick. What was that? 10th? He's the 10th least intercepted quarterback in the NFL. I'll take those numbers. The one who's leading the NFL is Sam Howell, by the way, the 23-year-old for Washington. He's got 20 TDs thrown, 19 INTs. He's going for that wonderful Jameis combo of 1-to-1 with our turnovers and our touchdowns. So kudos to him. Now, Josh Allen's got 16 interceptions, but Josh Allen makes it up with touchdowns, and Josh Allen's had quite a few touchdowns this year. So people try to gas up EB. Look, we actually had TJ. I don't think you were here on the last episode, and we're going to get more into this less rabbit trailing, more Atlanta Falcons analysis. But we talked about it pretty heavily in last episode. I mean, I think EB is not getting picked because of EB. I don't think it has anything to do with anything else. It's just, there's just something about him, I think, that isn't head coaching material. And I think that's fine. But anyway, you look where all those other guys are. Desmond Ridder has 11 interceptions. There's only 15 players in the NFL. 15 quarterbacks have thrown 10 interceptions or more, and 2 of them are in our division. Couldn't be me. Couldn't be me. At least I ain't had to seen that. Let's hope that doesn't happen this upcoming week. So here we are, looking at the Atlanta Falcons. Stopping them as runners has got to be, I mean, for me, it's like, you want to beat Desmond Ridder? Make him throw the damn ball. Make him throw the ball. That's got to be the biggest thing for me. Make him throw the football. And if you can make that happen, you win. Because that's the problem. I mean, the guy turns the ball over, but he can extend downs with his feet. He does a pretty solid job, I would say. I think he does a solid job of extending plays and getting into the scramble drill. But, yeah, that's where they're at. So, it's kind of a real tough one, right? You know, that's for whatever reason, the New Orleans Saints have really struggled with quarterbacks and mobility, and DA has just not found a solid fix to that, whether it's a lack of a player who can do that. Because I'll be honest, if you look at the 6 years of DA being a coordinator, it hasn't always been that way in New Orleans. But as this defense has evolved and especially gotten older at certain positions, that's become more of a problem. So that's something to watch out for. When it comes down to third down conversions, though, here's a crazy one. They are getting 40% third down conversions. Well, that's right around where you want to be in the league. Like, that's actually solid. That's better than New Orleans, who's at 39%. Even though, believe it or not, New Orleans has a better red zone percentage than the Atlanta Falcons. New Orleans has moved their red zone percentage up to 52%. And that's an interesting number because the New Orleans Saints were really struggling with that for, I would say, most of the season. And I am not trying to do what DA is going to try to do, which is tell you all good things and all the great things this New Orleans Saints team actually does and how they're actually better than everybody thinks they are. But that's an improvement considering it was in the like 30% range. Now, if you want to get a comparison of what it was before, well, if you go back to 2020 when you did have like noodle arm Drew Brees, and I say noodle arm in just a accurate fashion, not a insulting fashion. Under noodle arm Drew Brees and technically 4 starts of Taysom Hill, they had a 72% conversion percentage in the red zone. And then the next year, when they had Jameis Winston, Trevor Siemian, Ian Book, Taysom Hill, they still did it 59%. So no matter what, no mistaking, 2022 and 2023 have seen a significant decline in red zone effectiveness. But over the past month and a half, the New Orleans Saints have been one of the best teams in the NFL actually executing in the red zone, which has been really nice to see. That's going to have to be something that continues into this game because, fun fact, the Atlanta Falcons are only converting on 47% of their red zone trips throughout the season. And it hasn't actually gotten better as the season's gone on. They have lost 3 of their last 4 games. And of those 3 of the last 4, it's not like they were playing juggernauts. They lost to Tampa, lost to Carolina, managed to beat the Indianapolis Colts. I was actually kind of surprised that they did that, and then lost to the Chicago Bears. And not only did they lose to the Bears, they dominated against the Bears. The Bears dominated against them. Like, the Bears looked like a capable, effective team. The Bears had over 400 yards of offense, almost 40 points. Impressive. And I do agree with TJ. They do have great talent in certain areas of their field, Jesse Bates being one of them. I don't like to tell a lot of Madden stories, but believe it or not, this is actually a year that I purchased Madden, and Jesse Bates gets on my damn nerves because Jesse Bates is too damn good in Madden. I mean, he is really, really good. But honestly, he's really good on the field too. Thankfully for the New Orleans Saints, that is not something that can be said for the entirety of this team. We talked about the New Orleans Saints struggles in terms of pass rushing. Well, they've got the same struggles over there. Now, they do have 39 sacks in Atlanta. And if you compare that to New Orleans, that is more. New Orleans has 33. That said, you look at who's getting their sacks, it's not a lot of, they don't have a single guy that's just dominating. They have a lot of coverage sacks is what I would call them, which is a good thing to have. And I think Jesse Bates obviously plays a role in that. But those aren't good numbers. Like, if you were to finish a season, a normal season that we were used to growing up, 16 games, 39 sacks is a bad year. You want to hit a minimum of 40. Good teams are in the 50-plus range, and New Orleans done the 50-plus range. And to be clear, I'm calling out both the Saints D-line and the Falcons D-line not being very consistent and effective pass rushing units. Now, as far as pass coverage goes for this team, that is actually where I find that they have some flaws. Same thing that we brought up last game. Richie Grant is somebody to target. He has given up 5 TDs deep through the air. He's given up 353 air yards. Him and A.J. Terrell have been the struggle buses. A.J. Terrell has given up 370 yards through the air with 146 yards after catch, while Richie Grant has given up 151 yards after catch. There are opportunities there, but you do have to watch out for certain guys who are playing at a high level. Jesse Bates is one of them. He has 6 interceptions, though he's given up 3 TDs, a 65.8 quarterback rating. He is hands down their best player on the entire defense. I think that Jesse Bates deserves Pro Bowl nod. I think that Jesse Bates should go to the Pro Bowl. I do. I know we're not supposed to say anything positive about Atlanta Falcons. I'm just keeping it real. I like Jesse Bates before he was in Atlanta, though, right? I like Jesse when he was with Cincinnati. I hate that he came to Atlanta, but it is what it is. He's a very good player. And if you talk about what he's doing for his career, you can argue this is the best season he's ever had in his career. This is a career high in tackles, though if you remember back in the Saints days of old, it's not a good thing for your safety to have 128 tackles, but he's got 128 tackles. He's got 6 interceptions, 3 tackles for loss. He's also forced 3 fumbles. He's having a career year. I feel bad for him that he did it in Atlanta. I wish the man would have went to a playoff team and done it. Instead, he went to Atlanta. So now he's going to have a Pro Bowl career year, and he's an Atlanta Falcon. Yay! Cool. You're really good on a really terrible team. Fantastic for you, Jesse. But he is the premier name to watch out for on this Falcons roster. Everybody else, I'm not saying is a pushover because I do think that they have talent. But what I am saying is this is how you target them, right? This is how you target them. Rich says you can add at least 6 to 10 more TDs because they take Carr out at the goal sometimes. I'm not going to add anything. I'm going to keep numbers how they are. Situations are situations. Context get lost if we start cherry picking what stats we go over. So if we learn anything from the first game this year against the Atlanta Falcons, it's Jesse Bates is who to watch out for and be careful of. And let Bijan Robinson and Algier run as much as they want to. You need to stop the quarterback in the pocket. And I say that because as much as I respect Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier, because I really do feel like as a combo, they're very, very good. They're not as good as what you have in Detroit, and they're not as good as the classic boom and zoom of Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara. That said, they're still good. But they've also only combined for 8 rushing touchdowns. They are not a group that I fear that heavily, whereas I do fear extension of plays and extension of downs. And the best way to stop that is to make Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heineke, both of them, throw the football. Make them win by being quarterbacks, and what tends to happen is when you try to make them win by being quarterbacks, they do poorly. In fact, if you go by their accuracy ratings, Taylor Heineke has a 69% on-target percentage, and a 24% of his throws are listed as bad throws, as in they are not accurate ball placement throws per SIS. Those are big numbers. I know all of this is subjective. I'm just pointing out this is a thing for him. To give you something to compare that to, by the way, Derek Carr this year, who has had his flaws, has a 16% of his throws being listed as bad throws, as in they're not accurate, they're not in good ball placement, etc. 16%. So when you're comparing that to what Atlanta is throwing at you, it's significant. I mean, 8 points higher, that's pretty bad. So whether you face Desmond Ridder or whether you face Taylor Heineke, you're going to face a quarterback who is not a high-end quarterback in this league. So you put the onus on them to be successful. What's the blueprint for that? Well, you actually just saw it last game, right? Build a lead, come out, score your first drive. Love that you finally did it. Just took 17 weeks to make it happen, but New Orleans came out last week, scored on their first drive, and lo and behold, starting to build a lead early, making your opponent one-dimensional tends to have an impact. Who would have thought that could actually happen? Buccaneers got one-dimensional, didn't score until the fourth quarter. Saints had a 17-0 lead at halftime. And look how the defense was able to do things that they normally weren't able to do, all because they built a lead and then forced the opponent to be one-dimensional. And it doesn't have to be even a complete like black and white version of one-dimensional. It's, you look at last week's game against the Bucs, they still had a decent amount of rushing attempts. But you can tell that it was a lot less and even less effective than what it normally was. But they still ran the ball 14 times, not counting Baker Mayfield's kneel. Most of that was in the first half, though. And they started pulling back for that. And if you compare it, New Orleans Saints ran the ball, I think, 32 times, not including Derek Carr's kneel downs. So New Orleans dominated that game start to finish, even though the score wasn't that beautiful 37 points that the Chicago Bears put up against Atlanta. It was still the exact type of game that this team was supposed to do. It's the same thing that you have to do in this game. You have to come out, have good drives early on, be aggressive, never take your foot off the gas, which they absolutely did take their foot off the gas in the second half against Tampa, and it almost cost them the game, but that's Pete Carmichael for you. But come out, score, build a lead, and then force the opposing quarterback to be that guy. When they forced Baker Mayfield to be that guy, he wasn't that guy. Now, I'm not saying Baker Mayfield's bad, because I think Baker's had a very good season. I would not call Baker Mayfield great, but I would say that Baker Mayfield he's a mid-tier quarterback who is playing at an upper level. I would say Baker Mayfield is a top 15 quarterback this year. I'm curious what everybody else would rank him at. I might have Baker Mayfield somewhere in that top 10 range, and that's okay because he's not elite, but he's playing really well. Good for him. Happy for you. But you put him in the pressure cooker, what does he do? Like every other mid-tier quarterback, you put a good guy who's even having a good season in the pressure cooker, and he makes mistakes, right? There's a difference between being elite and being a guy who can play really well. And Baker's a guy that can play really well, and there's no shame in that at all. I'm not trash-talking Baker Mayfield. I'm simply acknowledging a truth. He's a mid-tier quarterback playing at a high level. That's fantastic if you're a Tampa Bay fan. But you got to support around him. And we're talking about playing an Atlanta team that doesn't have that. Like you could do the Trunks and Gotenks fusion dance. Well, Goten and Trunks to make Gotenks fusion dance with Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heineke, and you still wouldn't get Baker Mayfield. If you did the Trunks and Goten fusion dance, you'd probably get Gardner Minshew. Yeah. You'd probably get Gardner Minshew, who has had a solid season for Indianapolis. You'd get Gardner Minshew. So again, the big thing is you've got to find a way to take the quarterback for Atlanta and make them win this game. I think that's where they're going to fall short. I don't think that's where there is strength in Atlanta, right? Now, I'm not saying that Desmond Ridder or Taylor Heineke are complete trash, and neither of them can have any level of success. In fact, I think Desmond Ridder has helped orchestrate two fourth quarter comebacks. But I think a lot of that is the talent around them. And one good thing about this New Orleans Saints team is finally the defense has found itself again. And if you look at how they've done secondary-wise, they've honestly done so heckin' well. There's only one defensive starter in the linebacker or secondary that's giving up 100 quarterback rating or higher, and that one player is Pete Warner. And most people probably aren't going to be that salty against Pete. I do think that Pete has had a step back season, but I don't think he's playing bad. I just think that he's had some really, really difficult matchups that teams have found a way to target him on. But you look at guys like Alontae Taylor. Alontae Taylor, 86 quarterback rating when targeted. Right? You look at a guy like Isaac Yiadom, who has had to play significant snaps this year. 85 quarterback rating when targeted, 48.9% completion percentage. Look at Marshawn Lattimore. Even though we're curious if he'll still be with the team next year, he's been with the team this year, 57%, 74 quarterback rating when targeted. Then you get to Paulson Adebo, who is, funny enough, the youngest corner the team actually has on the roster. I know that that number has shocked a few people when I've said it, so just to remind you, he's the youngest corner on the roster, Paulson Adebo, even though it's his third year. He's allowing a team best 63 quarterback rating when targeted, and he has 4 interceptions. 55% of the passes thrown his way are completed. So we're definitely looking at a team that is inconsistent when it comes to the front four, but when it comes to that back seven, pretty damn consistent in the passing game. So again, you got to focus on making quarterback beat you, right? Now, for those curious, Alontae Taylor is 25 already. Alontae Taylor turned 25 this past December, and Paulson Adebo will turn 25 this upcoming summer. I think it's in July. I don't have their birthdays memorized because I'm not that much of a creeper, but yeah, I think he turns 25 this summer. He is like 6-ish, 7-ish months younger than Alontae Taylor. So Alontae Taylor and Paulson Adebo will both be 25-ish for most of the season, and then Alontae Taylor will turn 26 at the end of 2024. So you got two young cornerbacks that you really, really like. Isaac Yiadom's only 27. You like him as a depth guy. And if you do choose to move on from Marshawn Lattimore, who will be 28 next year, and you can find a guy that wants him and you believe in who's behind him, we'll see. We'll see. But again, this is all conjecture because, as we said at the start of the show, I don't think that there's a guarantee that Lattimore is getting traded, but I do think that they have the door open if somebody wants to make the call and make an appropriate offer. But they're going to have to make a pretty big, substantial offer to make that happen. We'll see. I'm not saying it's not going to happen. I'm just letting y'all know that doors are open. Possibilities are there. We'll just have to wait and see. But if somebody said right now that we'll pick up a lot of his contract and we'll give you a first-round pick, I would take it. I would. Why would I take it? Well, the same people out there saying that we should get rid of DA and everything, that's because you need to rebuild your team. And sure, I think the coaching staff needs a rebuild. I am praying. I am literally looking up to the Lord above saying, I know that you don't want me to ask you about sports-related stuff, but please let the New Orleans Saints do to the offensive coaching staff what LSU just did to the defensive coaching staff. Please hear my fervent cries and prayers. Open up your gates and pour down your blessings of canceled contracts on the Saints offensive coaching staff. Do that for me, please. But even with all that, even if you did all of that, you still have to work on making the roster better. And I think that Lattimore has probably 3 to 4 good years in him. I think one thing that's becoming a little bit concerning about Lattimore, though, is Lattimore's not played a full season since 2021. That's a little bit concerning. So, God could care less about football. I don't know if he could care less. I don't think he cares at all about football, but I still can ask. I can still ask. I really don't think God gives a flying flip about anybody's sports, but I'm still going to ask. So the big thing with Lattimore is he played 7 games last year. And even if he were to come back this week, which he isn't, he's played 10 games this year. And in no way am I trying to besmirch his name or say that he is not playing at a high level. And if I'm the New Orleans Saints, I'm selling him that he's healthy now, that we're just saving him for the trade. But yeah, that's one of the few, if any, trade pieces New Orleans has. And they don't have many. Now, would they need to trade him for cap reasons? Absolutely not. Trading him usually actually hurts you cap-wise, not helps you. But the big thing is, trading him would actually help you a lot in acquiring new, younger talent and technically cheaper talent, because we're talking about generally getting draft picks for that. So we just have to wait and see. But you're right. Is what it is. Has Bond been the answer we needed this season to add some juice to the pass rush? I mean, Bond was the answer when they drafted him. Just don't use him like that. Hell, the only reason that he really has gotten the uses that he has is because Cameron Jordan's had injuries. But do I think that he needs to be the consistent third down? Do I basically think they need to run a NASCAR package and he's on the end? Yup. Absolutely. The only difference is I think our NASCAR package, because a NASCAR package, for those that don't know, is typically a 4 defensive end alignment specifically for pass rushing. The only difference is our NASCAR should include Brian Breezy. So you'd have 1 3-tech in there. But yeah, I mean, I absolutely would have him in there. We'll just wait and see if that ends up happening. Would I trade a top corner for a top D lineman? Depends on who the top D lineman is. Depends on the situation. I mean, like if freaking Cincy called and said, hey, we'll give you this defensive end back if you give us a great corner, I would take that in a heartbeat. If freaking, let's go through. We're going to get back to this Atlanta game. Y'all keep distracting me. Y'all too focused on the offseason. The season ain't over, but I'm trying to be respectful because y'all pay for my kids to eat. So I do want to try to answer y'all's questions and everything. But we go through the league leaders this year. Let's talk about sack leaders. All right, let's do that really quickly. Like quick, fast, in a hurry. And let's just roll out some names because Trey Hendrickson, who leads the NFL in sacks, tied with TJ Watt, is not getting traded. But let's just say, in theory, a maybe, if maybe Seattle called about like Boye Mafe, would I accept that? I would not. I would not. If they called, like if Detroit called with Aiden Hutchinson, I'd accept that in like a heartbeat. If, Buffalo called with Leonard Floyd, I'd be like, no, thank you, even though he has 10.5 sacks this season, right? I would rather have a guy like, who's a young guy that I like that is playing at a decent level. Because obviously you're not going to get Will Anderson from Houston, but what's a little older guy? When I say little older, like, let's just say early 20s. Josh Allen, I don't think Josh Allen get traded. And Josh Allen's 26, turning 27. But I don't think Josh Allen is somebody that they would even risk trading. He's also been another guy who's been so up and down. And he also doesn't really fit DA that well. I'm just trying to think of a name that like I would go, you know what? I'd take that. Maybe Jonathan Greenyard. Now, for those who have no idea who the hell I'm talking about, he's the guy opposite Will Anderson in Houston. He's got 12.5 sacks this year. Now, him by himself is not elite, but he is very good, and he's younger than Lattimore is, so maybe that one. If I just have to name people and find somebody to name. But, yeah, if I just have to find somebody to name. Chances of Breeze showing up on the Epstein list? Wow. Probably 0, but yeah. As soon as we trade Lattimore, we'll get a franchise quarterback and wish we had kept him. But what franchise quarterback do you even think we're going to get, Don? Who do you think's out there? Who the heck you think is around? Ain't nobody around. Draft Jayden Daniels. Dude, number one, Gundam, Saints ain't drafting Jayden Daniels. And number two, Jayden Daniels don't want to come to the Saints. Sorry, Gundam. I'm trying to help you. This man brings it up every week. Every freaking week. That man don't want to come here. I'm sorry. He don't. Not only does he not fit New Orleans, he don't want to come here. I hate to keep breaking your heart, Gunner. You're just going to have to follow Jayden to a new team. It's not going to be black and gold. So, crushing your hopes? I'm just telling you the truth. There is no reason for the Saints to even consider Jayden Daniels. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. He doesn't fit. Now, if you manage to rebuild the entire Saints offense and you could build around him, maybe. But you ask me this. Are the New Orleans Saints going to completely rebuild everything about their offense? Personnel, coaching staff, and style. Are they? No, they are not. That means it makes no sense to draft Jayden Daniels. He doesn't fit this team. He doesn't fit the personnel they have. And by the way, is in nothing negative about Jayden Daniels. I think he deserved the Heisman. I think everybody else who talked about all these other names that deserved it more are stupid. I thought Jayden Daniels was the clear Heisman guy the entire season. Jayden Daniels was it. He's the guy. So it's not about Jayden Daniels' talent. It's just about style. He doesn't know or run a similar offense. New Orleans Saints are not trying to run an offense that caters to his abilities, and they're stubborn enough to not make any type of changes outside of the system that they're currently running. So unless you think that the New Orleans Saints are going to change at all three levels, no, there's absolutely no shot in Jayden Daniels. And even if you took Jayden Daniels, the only thing that would happen to Jayden Daniels in New Orleans is he would be ruined. Because they would try to put a square, amazing player into a round peg hole, and he wouldn't fit, and it would look terrible. And then everybody talk about Jayden Daniels is the biggest bust since Jamarcus Russell from LSU. And that's not fair to him. I want him to actually go somewhere that's going to try to build around him and give the best chance for success. I agree with the Muse Batman. Jayden Daniels comes here. He's just the next Zach Bond. He's a guy that got drafted here that didn't fit, and they tried to make him into something he isn't. His abilities allow him to adapt to a lot of different offenses. Nope, they don't. Stop it. No, it's not. He's not. Now, maybe if he came here and sat for an entire year, but there is not a quarterback. Jayden Daniels is not a guy that is transcendent of scheme. He is not transcendent of scheme. I'm sorry. He ain't that good. He is great, but you're talking about like guys who come around once every 10 years. Jayden Daniels is not that. He is not literally any system. Earnhardt Perkins, West Coast, vertical, air raid, option. He's not that guy. He is not the literally no matter what you got, I can do it guy. He's not. And hell, Lamar Jackson, who's an MVP, isn't that guy. But if you can have a spot for him that focuses on what he is elite at, sure. Now, you gotta keep in mind that my argument is not against Jayden Daniels. My argument is literally against the New Orleans Saints. I don't think the New Orleans Saints can do anything with Jayden Daniels. So I would hope they don't waste that time. This is not meant to be a slander Jayden Daniels episode. Again, I think he deserved the Heisman. I think he's absolutely fantastic. I just don't think he fits in New Orleans, and I don't think New Orleans has the coaching staff to train, raise, and mold him into an elite quarterback. I don't. New Orleans needs a guy like a CJ Stroud type quarterback in the draft. Now, granted, they just don't grow on trees. But if we're talking about fits, CJ Stroud as a prospect is a hell of a lot better fit than Jayden Daniels. Which is why our West Coast offense is having a great time with him down in Houston. So, Jordan says, I haven't been watching the team the past few weeks, but I see Zach Bond has transitioned to pass rush. Do you think he can do that role full time? He should have been doing that role full time, period. Should have been doing that role full time, period. So, look how Lamar Jackson transformed himself to a pocket passer. But he hasn't, though. Like, that's the thing. Like, Lamar is still Lamar. Lamar has just simply gotten better at doing everything that he does. Lamar still does not transcend every scheme. And Lamar Jackson is freaking amazing. Like, did y'all see the play where he, against Miami, where he faked that he was going to throw it with his left just to flip his hips and throw it with his right? Like, the dude's just really, really good. But he is not transcendent of scheme. Right? Good teams build their scheme around their players. New Orleans, as we can clearly see, brings in players to fit their scheme. New Orleans has it ass backwards. And until they actually get their ass in the right order, I don't want them drafting somebody like Jayden Daniels. Now, you finally get my dreams to come true, my literal prayers to come true, and they wipe the offensive floor clean, we can talk about it. We're talking about it right now, today, January 4th, 2024. It's just silliness. Just silliness. So. Anyway. Explain transcendent scheme. All right, so there are very, very, very rare quarterback talents who can play any offensive scheme that exists. You know, you can argue those guys like the Drew Brees, the Peyton Mannings. Hell, you can go back to some of the old guys. I'd throw Warren Moon's name in there. Who doesn't matter if it's a West Coast offense, an Earnhardt Perkins style system, where they're doing air raid, RPO, whatever, they would be effective no matter what because of certain intangibles that they had. And those are just like super rare guys. And you can honestly argue that Brady and Breeze don't fit that, but they kind of do. They're just not necessarily great at it. So I guess honestly, they probably don't either. It's very few guys that you could just say can do that and run multiple offensive styles. Like Lamar runs a very specific style that has to work and cater to him. And that's okay because Baltimore has taken the time to do that. But you could not just throw Lamar into our system and him be near as successful as he is. He just wouldn't be. That's okay. Like, that's not a shot at Lamar. They're actually doing the right thing over in Baltimore. They're building around Lamar. It's what you should do. You find what he's great at, you make him even better at those things, and then you build around him. That's what a good franchise should do if you find a quarterback who's a franchise level quarterback. Instead of just having a system, you find what he's great at, ignore the bad parts of him, like you do want him to be better at the bad parts, but you focus on what makes him elite trait-wise, and you build around those traits. Why is the biggest rivalry the Falcons? I'm 34, and the Bucs is the team I hate the most. They've won 2 Super Bowls in my lifetime. Vic and Brooks were cousins, so it felt respectable. The Bucs have been a bigger issue. Well, it's for several reasons to appreciate. Number one, there's a much more personal family connection between Atlanta and New Orleans, especially after Katrina, because a lot of our displaced families went to Atlanta. So that contributed to the angst. There's also just we both sucked. There's we're the closest together, regional wise. Like Atlanta's not that far from New Orleans, right? And you look at who was our divisional opponents before the NFC South was created. We're having to play guys like the Rams and the 49ers. So even though you've got this really old rivalry, you also got to remember that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were not always in the Saints division. So Tampa, way back in the day, go back in the history of the days. So Tampa now is in the NFC South, right? But you go back to I don't know what year was it swapped in 2000. They were in the Central Division. All right, so back in 1990, here's who you had on your Central. You had the Bears, the Bucks, the Lions, the Packers, and the Vikings. Then you had the 49ers, the Saints, the Rams, and the Falcons. And the Falcons and the Saints basically both were the suckiest of the sucks, and they were together. But they were also close, so it made sense. The 49ers and the Rams basically dominated the 90s and the 80s. Even when the Saints hit their peak, they still really struggled to get past the 49ers because that was in the middle of the Bill Walsh, Joe Montana, and Steve Young era. So even when the Saints hit their peak, they struggled to overcome that mountain. And what's crazy, you talk about how great the Saints were in the 90s. You go back and look how many times they won the division. This is a crazy one for you. How many times do you think the New Orleans Saints won the division when we talk about the Dome Patrol and all those years where they won 12 games, 11 games, 12 games? One time. Once. In a 10-year period where they basically were a winning record team from 1988, or hell, even go before that. Go all the way back to 1987 to 1993. They won the division one time. Even though they're historically the best linebacker unit ever, one of the best defenses ever. They won the division once. So the truth is, the New Orleans Saints and the Atlanta Falcons, not only being regionally close to each other, have a history of being the bottom feeders of the division, and the rivalry was out of necessity because this is what made us real. And it has extended when the NFC South became a thing. And then it got worse when things happened like all the Katrina jokes, and then just the rivalry of Roddy White. Roddy White was the biggest trash talker Atlanta had in 15 years. And I will agree that Tampa's had more success in the 2000s, but I don't see Tampa as a real rival. It's whatever. You can even ask most Saints players when they walk in the building and become part of the culture, the Falcons are the team that we hate. It's just like up in the NFC North. It's not like the Detroit Lions are nobody. But the rivalry is Bears-Packers, irregardless of how good or bad the team is that year. It's Bears-Packers. Doesn't mean that the Vikings and the Lions are just nobodies, but the rivalry is Bears-Packers. That just is how it is. Now, maybe newer, younger generations of Saints fans, maybe they change that up. I don't know. But as of today, forever and always, it'll be the Atlanta Falcons. And that's why it's always the Falcons. Always. Always the Falcons. It be like that. So, it'd be like that. To your point, I also forgot about Wyatt still hate the Bucks, especially when they got Brady. I don't blame the Bucks for getting Brady. I'll get a Super Bowl in the way that I can. And I'm not one of those guys that tries to cheapen somebody else's Super Bowl. You know what? Congrats. Y'all won a Super Bowl. You got one. I'm happy for you. Turtles and, eggs and kisses. But whatever. For me, it's the Falcons. I've got personal memories with the Falcons. Like, personal painful memories with the Falcons, if we're just being honest. I remember I got married. Yeah, it's story time. Sit down, children. It's story time. I remember getting married. One, terrible mistake. Don't do it. If you're thinking about it, stop it. No, don't do it. Save yourself a lot of money. I'm just kidding. Anyway, New Orleans Saints, Atlanta Falcons. So anyway, point I was making, got married, going to go on a cruise. Sounds fantastic. Do you like going on cruises? Who doesn't love going on cruises? Everybody loves going on cruises. Well, here's the thing. Cruises are all fun and all, unless something happens that ruins the experience for you. Like, it just puts a bad taste in your mouth. Like, dang, I thought this was going to be nice and it was actually terrible. That's kind of how my honeymoon started. It could have been great. Could have been fantastic. But it wasn't. It wasn't. Because of the Falcons. And I hate the Falcons. So I've got personal memories tied to the Falcons. Now, my worst Saints memory has nothing to do with Atlanta, but that's okay. My worst Saints memory has nothing to do with Atlanta, and that's okay. But when we talk about just what grinds my gears, the games that just kind of really get to me and the problems and all these other things, it's when I think about some of my worst experiences as a fan of this team. It comes back to damn Falcons. So, yeah, if you're curious what game I'm referring to, if you go back to 2010, I know we got to go way back in the Wayback Machine. Go back to 2010. That should have been right. 2010, right? We went on a cruise, and when it launched, we were watching the Falcons play. It was September 26th or something. We were watching the Falcons play the Saints, and we ended up losing in overtime that game, 27-24. And I had to watch it on the boat with everybody else. And anyway, it was awful. It was just terrible. Terrible. But anyway, fun facts about Rev. Anyway, let's move on to less fun facts. All right. As a flashcards, tell me what you see. Flashbacks. That's what I'm having right now. Having flashbacks. The Vikings are wannabes for the rivalry, but Packers with Wisconsin don't bother with them. Yeah, and it's wild because I kind of hate to say this, but that's how Tampa fans feel. If you ever see Tampa fans on Twitter, they trash talk as if there's a rivalry, and Saints fans mostly just ignore them. They're the little brother who wants so bad to be in the rivalry, and 90% of the fan base doesn't give them the time of day. But any Falcons fans breathes, and we go up, and it's fighting time. They're allowed to continue breathing? Yeah, no thank you. But anyway, score prediction time. New Orleans Saints will beat the Atlanta Falcons. They will beat them 27-17. Drop your score predictions in, and we'll see how it goes. Also, we have to see who ends up being the winner/finalist for the Predict a T-shirt, if you will, for Derek Carr's stats. We did have a channel created for that, for the Derek Carr predictions. And right now, I would say of the ones posted, the closest, it's going to be real close between TJ and 007. We'll see who ends up winning. Those are the two that I have that I've gone through and looked who are leading. Both of them have very similar numbers. And just to rattle off what both of them predicted. So TJ predicted 26 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, but he also threw in 4,200 yards. So to give you a catch up on what Derek Carr is right now, it ain't near 4,000 yards. I'm just let you know that man has to throw a shit ton to do that. So he's at 3,600 yards right now, 21 TDs and 8 interceptions. So TJ had 26 TDs, 12 interceptions, and 4,200 yards. He's not throwing 600 yards. 007 had 27 TDs, so slightly higher, 15 interceptions, also higher, but only 3,350 yards. So he had like high scoring, potent, but don't use them that often. So out of that, we'll see how it ends up going. So clearly he's actually hit one of those marks. It depends on how we want to grade this. So he actually has hit the yardage mark for 007. He has not hit a single of the marks for TJ, but if we do it based on who's closest, TJ probably wins. We'll see what the final numbers are. Might give it a clearer picture. For example, if he throws 7 interceptions, I'm giving it to 007. Just going to let you know. If he ends up with 15 interceptions, I'm giving it to 007. But we'll just have to wait and see how it ends up finishing out. TJ says 23-13 Saints. Vlad says 45-16 Saints. Man, I'd love a first 40 burger. Nikki says 27-17 Saints. Yah says 23-10 Saints over the Falcons. I love that one. That made me very happy. That made me very, very happy if New Orleans could pull that off. Look here, Saints fans. I love and appreciate every single one of you. You're amazing. You're part of the greatest nation in sports. Who dat nation? Who dat? God bless. I will catch you after the game Sunday. Hopefully it's a one of celebration. It doesn't matter if we make the playoffs or not. We'll be celebrating beating the Atlanta Falcons. Deuces. That's me. Catch you on the next Who Dat Confessional. And I am